because of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, it is never in vain that an ardent and sincere prayer is addressed to the Divine's grace. With my love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo from the collective works of our Lord Sri Aurobindo, SABCL, Volume 16, Book The Supramental Manifestation, 54th Chapter, The Yoga and Its Objects, Continuation. Page 417, large stanza.
How shall he cure the ills he never felt? He carries the suffering world in his own breast.
Continuation of the supramental manifestation, the yoga and its objects. Page 417, last stanza. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, it is not only in things animate, but in things inanimate also we must see Narayana, experience Shiva through our arms around Shakti. When our eyes, that are now blinded by the idea of matter, open to the supreme light, we shall find that nothing is inanimate, but all contains, expressed or unexpressed, involved or evolved, secret or manifest, or in course of manifestation. Not only that state of evolved, involved consciousness which we call annam or matter, but also life, mind, knowledge, bliss, divine force and being, prana, manas, vijnana, ananda, chit, sat. In all things, the self-conscious personality of God broods and takes the delight of his gunas. Flowers, fruits, earth, trees, metals, all things have a joy in them of which you will become aware, because in all Sri Krishna dwells, Pravishya, having entered into them, not materially or physically, because there is no such thing, space and time being only conventions and arrangements of perception, the perspective in God's creative art, but by Chit, the divine awareness in his transcendent being. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, and this world and every object in this world of Prakriti has been created as a habitation for the Lord. Nor is it enough to see him in all things and beings, Sarva Bhuteshu. You must see him in all events, actions, thoughts, feelings, in yourself and others throughout the world. For this realizations, two things are necessary. First, that you should give up to him the fruit of all actions. Secondly, you should give up to him the action themselves. Giving up the fruits of action does not mean that you must have the vairagya for the fruits, turn away from them, or refuse to act with a given end before you. It means that you must act not because you want this or that to happen, or think it necessary that this or that should happen and your action needed to bring it about, but because it's kartavyam, demanded by the master of our being, and must be done with whatever result God is pleased to give. You must put aside what you want and wish to know what God wants, distrust what your passions of your habitual opinions prefer to hold as right and necessary, and passing beyond them, like Arjuna in the Gita, seek only to know what God has set down as right and necessary. Be strong in the faith, for whatever is right and necessary will eventually, inevitably happen as a result of your due fulfillment of the kartavyam karma, even if it is not the result that you preferred or expected. The power that governs the world is at least as wise as you, and it is not absolutely necessary that you should be consulted or indulged in its management. God is seeing to it. But what is Kartavya Karma? Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says it is very difficult to say. Most people would translate Kartavya Karma by the English word and idea, duty. But if asked to define it, they would say it is a right and moral action. What people understand by right and morality, what you yourself conscientiously think to be right, or else what the good of the society, nation, or mankind demands of you. But the man who remains bound by these personal or social ideas of duty, necessary as they are for the ignorant to restrain and tame their clamorous desires or their personal egoism, will be indeed what is called a good man, but he will never attain to the fulfillment of this yoga. He will only replace the desire for one kind of a fruit by the desire for another kind. He will strive even more passionately, perhaps, for these higher results and be more bitterly grieved by not attaining them. There is no passion so terrible as the passion of the altruist, no egoism so hard to shake as the fixed egoism of virtue, precisely because it is justified in its own eyes and justified in the sight of men, and cannot see the necessity for yielding to a higher law. Even if there is no grieving over the results, there will be the labor and strife of the Rajasic Karta, struggling and fighting, getting eager and getting exhausted, not Trigunatita, always under bondage to the gunas. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, it was under the domination of these ideas of personal virtue and social duty that Arjuna refused to fight. Against his reasoning, Sri Krishna sets two different ideas, one inferior for the use of man, bound but seeking liberation, another superior for the liberated man, the Shastra, and surrender not only of the fruits of the work, but of the work itself to God. The virtue of the Shastra is that it sets up a standard outside ourselves, different from our personal desires, reasonings, passions, and prejudices, outside our selfishness and self will, by living up to which in the right spirit we can not only acquire self control, but by reducing even the sattvic ahankara to a minimum, prepare ourselves for liberation. In the old days, the Shastra was the Vedic Dharma based upon a profound knowledge of man's psychology and the laws of the world, revealing man to himself and showing him how to live according to his nature. Afterwards, it was the law of the Smritis which tried to do the same thing more roughly by classifying men according to the general classes of which the Vedas speak, the Chaturvarnya. Today, it is little more than blind mechanical custom and habitual social observance, a thing not sattvic but tamasic, not a preparatory discipline for liberation but a mere bondage.
Must enter eternity of night, and know God's darkness as he knows his Son. For this he must go down into the pit. For this he must invade the Dorhasva, imperishable and wise and infinite. He still must travel hell, the world to save.
Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, even the highest Shastra can be misused for the purpose of egoism, the egoism of virtue, and the egoism of prejudice and personal opinion. At its best, it is a great means towards the preparation of liberation. It is Shabda Brahma. But we must not be satisfied with mere preparation. We must, as soon as our eyes are open, hasten on to actual freedom. The liberated soul and the sadhaka of liberation, who has surrendered even his actions to God, gets beyond the highest Shastra. Shabda Brahmadi Vartate. The best foundation for the surrender of action is the realization that Prakriti is doing all our action at God's command, and God, through our Swabhava, determines the action. From that moment, the action belongs to Him. It is not yours, nor the responsibility yours. There is indeed no responsibility, no bondage of karma, for God has no responsibility. But it is in every way master and free. Our actions become not only like the sastric man's Swabhava Niyata, regulated by nature and therefore dharma, but the Swabhava itself is controlled like a machine by God. It is not easy for us, full as we are of the sanskaras of ignorance, to arrive at this stage of knowledge, but there are 3 stages by which it can be rapidly done. The first is to live in the spirit of the sloka, according as I am appointed by thee, O Hrishikesha, seated in my heart, so I act. When this has entered into your daily life, it will be easier to accomplish the second stage and living in the knowledge of the Gita. God stands in the heart of all beings, reeling round as a wheel by the Maya of the Trigunas. You will then be able to perceive the action of the Trigunas in you and watch the machinery at its work, no longer saying, Tata karomi, I do, but guna vartanta eva. It is merely the gunas that work. One great difficulty in these stages, especially before you can distinguish the action of the gunas, is the perception of the impurity of the swabhava, the haunting idea of sin and virtue. You must always remember that since you have put yourself in God's hands, He will work out the impurities, and you have only to be careful, as you cannot be attached either to the papa or punya, sin or virtue, for He has repeatedly given the assurance of safety. He says in the Gita, he who is devoted to me cannot perish. The third stage comes out of the second by the full realization of God or of itself by the grace of God. Not only will the Purusha stand apart and be Trigunatita, beyond the 3 gunas, but the Prakriti, though using the gunas, will be free from their bondage. Sattva, as we know it, will disappear into pure Prakasha and Jyoti, and the nature will live in a pure, free and infinite self-existing illumination. Tamas, as we know it, will disappear into the pure Shanti or Sarna, and the nature will take its firm stand on an infinite and ineffable rest and peace. Rajas, as we know it, will disappear into pure tapas, and the nature will flow in a free and infinite ocean of divine force.
Open not thy doorway to nameless power. Climb not the Godhead by the Titan's hold. Against the law he pits his single will. Across its way he soars his pride of night. Heavenward he clambers on a stair of stone, aspiring to live near the faceless sun.
Our Lord Sri Aurobindo continues to say, on that foundation of calm and in that heaven of light, action will occur as a spontaneous, objective expression of God's knowledge, which is one with the God's will. This is the condition of infinity, Anantya, in which this struggle of bond, unlimited sattva, rajas, tamas is replaced by a mighty harmony of three prakasha, tapas and samam. And even before you reach that condition, on the way to it, you will find that some mighty force, not your own, not situated in your body, though possessing and occupying it, is thinking for you, feeling for you, acting for you. Your very body, as well as your mind and heart, being moved by that force and not by yourself. You will enjoy that thought, feeling, and action, but neither possess nor be possessed by it. Your actions will disappear without leaving in you mark or trace, as a wave disappears from the surface of the sea, as water falls from the lotus leaf. Your mind, heart, and body will not be yours but God's. You yourself will be only a center of being, knowledge, and bliss through which God works in that. This is the condition in which one is utterly tachit, given up in all conscious being to God, in which there is utter fulfillment of the description. One whose state of being is free from egoism and whose understanding receives no stain. This is the surrender of action to which Sri Krishna gives so much of importance. Laying down all actions upon me with thy whole conscious being in Adhyatma Yoga, become free from desire and the sense of belongings. Fight, let the fever of thy soul pass from thee. For this great and complete liberation, it is necessary that you should be nispruha, nirdvanda, nirahankara, without the longing and reaching after things, free from the samskara of the dualities, arid free from egoism. For these three things are the chief enemies of self-surrender. If you are nirdvanda, you can be nispruha, but hardly otherwise. For every dvanda creates in the mind, by the very nature of the mind, some form of raga-dvesha, like and dislike, attraction and repulsion, whether they are the lowest dualities that appeal to the mind through the body, hunger and thirst, heat and cold, physical pleasure and pain, or the middle sorts that appeal to it through the feelings, desire, success and failure, victory and defeat, fortune, misfortune, pleasure, displeasure, joy and grief, hate and love, or the highest, which appeal to the mind through the discriminating buddhi, virtue and sin, reason and unreason, error and true. Lord Sri Aurobindo says, these things can only be put under our feet by complete knowledge, the knowledge that sees God in all things, thus comes to understand the relation of things to each other in his great cosmic purpose by complete bhakti, which accepts all things with joy, thus abolishing the dvandas because they come from the beloved, or by perfect action, offering up all works as a sacrifice to God with an entire indifference to these dualities which usually pursue all karma. Such knowledge, such bhakti, such karma come inevitably as the eventual result of the sankalpa of self surrender and practice of it. But it is ahankara that by making the relation and effect of things on ourselves or on things connected with us, the standard of life makes the dvandas a chain of our bondage. Ahankara in its action on our life and sadhana will be seen to be of three kinds: rajasic, tamasic, and sattvic. Rajasic binds by desire and craving in the nature for occupation and activity. It is always reaching after action, fruit of action. It is in order that we may be free from the Rajasic ahankara that we have the command, do not do works for the desire of the fruit, and the command to give up our actions to God. Tamas binds by weakness and the craving in which the nature for ease and inaction. It is also sinking into idleness, depression, confusion, fear, disappointment, and despair. It is in order that we may get rid of the tamasic ahankara that we are given the command, let there be no attachment to inaction, and the instruction to pursue the integral yoga always, whether we seem to advance or seem to be standing still or seem even to be going back, always with a calm faith and patient and cheerful perseverance. Sattva binds by knowledge and pleasure. It is always attacking itself to some imperfect realization, to the idea of one's own virtue, the correctness of one's own opinions and preferences or principles, or at its highest, as in the case of Arjuna, opposing some personal idea of altruism, justice, or virtue against the surrender of our will that God demands of us. It is for the escape from the sattvic ahankara that we have to pass beyond the attachment of the duality of virtue and sin. We'll continue.
In the way, withhold from thee the body of God's bliss. Swarge